Tsakhiagiin Elbegdorj is a Mongolian politician who has been President of Mongolia since 2009. He previously served as Prime Minister in 1998 and, again from 2004 to 2006. Elbegdorj is considered one of the principal champions in emerging markets and was one of the architects of democracy in Mongolia. Elbegdorj was one of the key leaders of the 1990 Mongolian Democratic Revolution that ended 70 years of communist rule in Mongolia, and co-drafted the country's 1992 constitution that guaranteed democracy and a free market economy. Elbegdorj has been labeled by his supporters as a freedom fighter and the golden sparrow of democracy, alluding to a bird that comes with spring sunshine after a long, harsh winter. Elbegdorj is the founder of the Al-Jalil newspaper, the country's first independent newspaper, and helped to establish the first independent television station in Mongolia. His tenure has focused on fighting corruption, environmental protection, women's rights, judicial reform, civic engagement, economic liberalization and privatization, property rights, and the abolition of the death penalty. Early life and education. Elbegdorj was born into a nomadic herding family in Tsakhiagiin province on 8 March 1963. He was the youngest of 8 sons. Elbegdorj spent most of his early childhood herding livestock through the high mountains of Tsakhiagiin. His father, Mongolian Tsakhia, was a veteran of Mongolia's border conflict with the Empire of Japan that resulted in the 1939 Battle of Tsakhiagiin Elbegdorj. Elbegdorj finished the Sum's 8-year school in 1979. Afterwards, his family moved to Erdenet City, and he finished Erdenet's No. 1 10-year school in 1981. Army in USSR's Army Academy. In 1981–82, Elbegdorj worked in copper ore mining and processing plant Erdenet concern as a machinist. In 1982, he was drafted into military service for submitting poems to the army newspaper Ulanod, which impressed army authorities, and heading a revolutionary youth unit in the army. He was awarded with the possibility to study military journalism and Marxism-Leninism at the USSR's Military Political Institute, Harvard Kennedy School. After his first term as prime minister, he spent a year at the University of Colorado Boulder's Economic Institute. Then Elbegdorj studied with a full scholarship at Harvard University and graduated from Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government with a Master of Public Administration in 2002. Leading democratic movement. During his studies in the USSR, Elbegdorj learned about glasnost, the concepts such as freedom of speech and economic liberties. After returning to Mongolia, he met other like-minded people and tried to present those ideas to a wider audience. Despite attempts of repression from the Politburo authority of the government, and threats by his employer to lose his job, at the end of a speech at the Young Artists' Second National Congress on 28 November 1989, Elbegdorj said that Mongolia needed democracy and appealed to youth to collaborate to create democracy in Mongolia. He told the audience, "We consider that perestroika is a timely and brave step. Youth's contribution to this revolutionary matter is not by supportive talks but by certain work. Our contribution is our objectives to be fulfilled. Our objectives are ... following democracy and transparency and contributing to glasnost and supporting fair progressive power ... These are the objectives of an initiatives group and organization that shall work After the Congress I hope we will gather and discuss with you about it in this. The organization shall be based on public, voluntary and democratic principles. The chairman of the Congress stopped Elbegdorj's speech and warned him not to say such things. It was 1989 and Mongolia had been a communist country for 68 years. At the time, it was alleged that every other person was an unofficial Communist Party spy who would report people who expressed opinions other than socialism and communism. During the break of the Congress, two young individuals met Elbegdorj and the three agreed to found a democratic movement and to secretly spread the news to other young people. Later the three met and united with 10 other individuals and they are known as the 13 leaders of Mongolia's democratic revolution. On his return from the Congress, his boss at the newspaper, Ulanod, warned Elbegdorj that he would be fired if he participated further in any activities out of work or engaged in any conduct inconsistent with communist and socialist ideology. Despite the warning, Elbegdorj and his friends met secretly with other young people in the Circle Auditorium of the National University of Mongolia and discussed democracy, free market economic policy, and other prohibited subjects of the time, and began to draft a plan to organize a democratic movement. They met many times and brought new friends and new supporters to join them secretly. One night they placed ads of their open demonstration in streets. On the morning of the 10th of December 1989, the first open pro-democracy demonstration met in front of the Youth Cultural Center in Ulaanbaatar. There Elbegdorj announced the creation of the Mongolian Democratic Union. The Mongolian Democratic Union founders publicly petitioned the government for a real implementation of perestroika, including allowing a multi-party system, the total implementation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in all party and government affairs. In subsequent months, activists led by Elbegdorj and others continued to organize demonstrations, rallies, protests and hunger strikes, as well as teachers and workers' strikes. Activists had growing support from Mongolians, both in the capital and the countryside, and the union's activities led to other calls for democracy all over the country. After numerous demonstrations of many thousands of people in the capital city as well as provincial centers, Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party's Politburo, the authority of the government, eventually gave way to the pressure and entered negotiations with the leaders of the democratic movement. Jamban Batmunk, chairman of Politburo of MPRP's Central Committee, decided to dissolve the Politburo and to resign on the 9th of March 1990. This paved the way for the first multi-party elections in Mongolia. Elbegdorj announced this news to the hunger strikers and to people who'd gathered on Sukhbator Square at 10 p.m. on the day after the negotiations between leaders of MPRP and Mongolian Democratic Union. As a result, Mongolia became the first Asia country to successfully transition from communist rule to democracy. Elbegdorj worked as the leader of the Mongolian Democratic Union in 1989 to 1997. In a documentary film about the president released in the year of the 25th anniversary celebrations of the Mongolian democratic changes, President Elbegdorj tells the story, the historical political change, and about reinventing democracy. Journalism career. Elbegdorj worked as a correspondent at Ulanod newspaper of the Mongolian Armed Forces and as the chief of an army literature unit between 1988 and 1990. While in these positions, Elbegdorj wrote articles disclosing all the good and bad in the army units and suggested improvements for the army. Prior to democratic movement's beginning, Elbegdorj founded Mongolia's first independent newspaper, Al-Chalil, and worked as its first editor-in-chief in 1990. The newspaper played a major role to complete the country's democratic revolution. He co-introduced freedom of press in the country by co-initiating law on press freedom and playing a key role to pass the law in 1998. Elbegdorj also helped to create Mongolia's first independent TV station, Eagle TV, in 1994. It was run by the former Mongolian Broadcasting Company, a joint venture of the U.S. Christian missionary organization Among Foundation and the Mongolia Media Corporation. Legislative career. Elbegdorj was elected to the parliament 4 times, in 1990, 1992, 1996 and 2008. As a member of People's Congress, Elbegdorj co-drafted and co-adopted Mongolia's new constitution on 13 January 1992. The new constitution guaranteed human rights, democracy, freedom of religion, and free speech. An international intellectual once referred Elbegdorj as Mongolia's Thomas Jefferson. Elbegdorj, as the chairman of the Democratic Party, co-led the Democratic Union coalition to its historic victory in the 1996 parliamentary elections. He served as the majority leader of the state Great Ural in 1996 to 2000 and as the vice speaker of the parliament in 1996–1998. Elbegdorj founded and worked as the head of Mongolia's first Entrepreneurs Association in 1991 as well. The association helped to privatize livestock for free to the herders from the socialist collective farms. As a result, the first private property was given to almost half of Mongolia's entire population. He supported the privatization of state-owned properties and assets in land. While as the chairman of the State Commission on Rehabilitation, Elbegdorj initiated and brought the state to apologize for the victims and families of over 36,000 people that had been persecuted and massacred during the years of Mongolian People's Party's communist rule. He played a key role in the approval of the rehabilitation law, which provided rehabilitation and compensation to the survivors and families of political victims, and recovery from the Stalinist purges, and prohibited future violation of human rights. In addition, the law established a memorial day for political victims. Furthermore, Elbegdorj was a member of the National Counseling Committee of the Democratic Party in 1994 to 2009, leader and chairman of the Democratic Party in 1996 to 1999, and April 2006, September 2008 respectively, and chairman of the Democratic Union Coalition of the Mongolian National Democratic Party and Mongolian Social Democratic Party in 1996 to 2000. Prime Minister. Elbegdorj served as the Prime Minister of Mongolia twice in 1998 and 2004 to 2006. First term as Prime Minister in 1998, a clause in the constitution was removed that prohibited members of parliament to take cabinet responsibility. Thus, on the 23rd of April 1998, the parliament elected Elbegdorj as the Prime Minister. During his first term, Elbegdorj attempted to solve looming economic, structural and political issues through several policy initiatives such as co-initiating law on press freedom and playing a key role to pass the law in 1998. Based on this law, another law passed that changed all daily state newspapers into public newspapers without direct control and censorship from the government. Elbegdorj's most significant achievement during his first term as Prime Minister was to collect tax and create tax income. The biggest taxpayer and only significant income contributor to the government's budget at the time was the copper ore mining and processing. Internet Mining Corporation, a joint stock company owned by the governments of Mongolia and the Russian Federation. EMC hadn't paid due tax, income and royalty to Mongolia's government between 1997 and 1998, which resulted in the financial crumbling of the government. Because of it, previous Prime Minister Tsakhiagiin stepped down due to pressure from the opposition party, MPRP. After becoming Prime Minister, Elbegdorj ordered an audit of EMC. The audit result revealed that the state due income did not enter the state account. Instead, it went to dubious accounts of directors at EMC. This embezzlement case was reported in detail in investigative series Swindle of the Century on Eagle Television. Elbegdorj dismissed the EMC's chairman. As a result, the government began to receive due tax, royalty and income from the EMC. In addition, at the recommendations of international financial institutions such as International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, aid grantors to Mongolia, and discount interest rate loan giver Asian Development Bank, Elbegdorj made a decision to sell state-owned Reconstruction Bank, which became illiquid and was experiencing tremendous loss, the biggest financial burden to the economy since its establishment in 1997. Golem Bank was the only one that offered to buy Reconstruction Bank. In response to this and the change of EMC's chairman, the minority group at the parliament MPRP demanded Elbegdorj to resign, and thus resulted Elbegdorj to lose confidence vote at the parliament. The parliament had prevented Elbegdorj's government from selling the bank. Elbegdorj's decision to sell the Reconstruction Bank was proven to be correct. The bank bankrupted soon after Elbegdorj's first term as prime minister was over, and the bankruptcy led the government to suffer gigantic amount of financial loss. Moreover, Elbegdorj made a decision to financially assist from tight budget to complete the construction of Mongolia's first wrestling palace, which was built for a long time. He stayed in office until Janavan Narat-Satsralt replaced him on 9 December 1998. Elbegdorj served as the chairman of the majority group of the parliament and the leader of the Democratic Union coalition and a member of parliament, respectively, in 1996 to 2000. In 2000-2001, he studied at the University of Colorado Boulder's Economic Institute, and earned a diploma. Then he studied with a full scholarship of Harvard University at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government and graduated with a Master of Public Administration in 2002. Then he worked as a consultant at the Millennium Development Goal Project, United Nations headquarters in New York, and is a consultant at Radio Free Asia in Washington, D.C. in 2002-2003. Afterwards, he returned to Mongolia and made series of public speeches touring in Mongolian provinces, inspiring the people and the youth, sharing his new ideas and perspectives based on his knowledge from Harvard University and the United States in combination with Mongolian way of life in 2003-2004. His lectures played a significant role to make Democratic Party get majority seats in 2004 Mongolian parliamentary elections. Second term as Prime Minister on 20 August 2004, Elbegdorj became the Prime Minister of Mongolia for the second time. This time he headed a grand coalition government after the vote in the parliamentary elections had been evenly split between the two major political forces, Democratic Coalition and the Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party. U.S. President George W. Bush highlighted about Elbegdorj as one of the country's democracy leaders to have been serving as the Prime Minister in his speech in Ulaanbaatar on 21 November 2005. The world needs more people such as yourself who are willing to admire liberty, President Bush wrote Elbegdorj immediately after his visit to Mongolia. During Elbegdorj's term on the 27th of January 2005, the government-controlled national state television and radio were converted into formally independent public organizations with increasingly smaller control by the government. Also, legal provisions that prohibited demonstrations on Ulaanbaatar Square were abolished on the 17th of November 2005. In his second term, his Prime Minister Elbegdorj proclaimed a fight against corruption and poverty, which he saw as the biggest challenges to Mongolia's economic development. Elbegdorj's government signed the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in April 2005 and ratified it in January 2006. His administration revealed the customs chairman's corruption case amounting to millions of dollars, from which the ex-chairman donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the MPRP in 2005. Elbegdorj attempted to support domestic businesses by eliminating excessive regulations, many licensing requirements, and import taxes for key category products. Mongolia was accepted into the European Union's GSP Plus system, which allows Mongolian exporters to pay lower customs tariffs when exporting to the European Union. During Elbegdorj's term as Prime Minister, to promote affordable computers and Internet access, Elbegdorj established Information and Communication Agency under the government. He subsidized and supported technical schools and specialized professions to reduce unemployment. By a decision of his government, English replaced Russian as the first foreign language to be taught in public schools. In addition, Elbegdorj initiated the erection of the Genghis Khan Memorial Complex in front of Mongolia's government house for the 800th anniversary of the Great Mongol Empire. Besides, Elbegdorj initiated a Green Wall environmental project to plant trees in barren areas and desert zones to prevent from massive sandstorms from Mongolia reaching to North America and to reduce air pollution. In August 2005, Elbegdorj wanted to run in by-elections in Ulaanbaatar's Bengal district. However, the MPRP threatened to leave the coalition if Elbegdorj ran against MPRP candidate Tsakhiagiin, and Elbegdorj withdrew. On the 13th of January 2006, the MPRP left the coalition anyway, and Elbegdorj was forced to resign. The MPRP proceeded to form a new government with the help of DP defectors and independent MPs, and Tsakhiagiin became the new prime minister. The events triggered protests from some civic groups and the followers. Mongolian economy had real GDP growth of 10.4% in 2004, 7.3% in 2005, and 8.6% in 2006 respectively during Elbegdorj's second term as prime minister, comparing to 7% in 2003 prior to Elbegdorj's government. 2009 presidential election. At the Democratic Party's convention on 3 April 2009, Elbegdorj defeated Erdogан Batüel in a contest for the party's nomination for the presidency of Mongolia. Elbegdorj won with 65.3% of the total vote. After Elbegdorj was announced as the candidate, the Civic Party and the Mongolian Green Party endorsed Elbegdorj's presidential candidacy. Elbegdorj won the 2009 Mongolian presidential election on 24 May 2009 with 51.21% of the votes, defeating incumbent President Enkhbayar, who got 47.41%. Elbegdorj was sworn into office as President of Mongolia on 18 June 2009. 2013 presidential election. The Democratic Party's National Consultative Committee held its convention on 7 May 2013 and decided to re-nominate Elbegdorj as a presidential candidate with 100% votes, and the Congressive Democratic Party, with 7,000 participants in Ulaanbaatar plus participants in all provincial centers connected via live internet video conference, voted 100% for Elbegdorj's nomination from the Democratic Party for the 2013 presidential election on 8 May 2013. Civil War Green Party and Mongolian National Democratic Party, which have seats at both the parliament and the government cabinet, endorsed Elbegdorj's presidential candidacy. The Republican Party and the Motherland Party expressed the full support for Elbegdorj's candidacy also. Elbegdorj won the 2013 Mongolian presidential election on 26 June 2013, with 50.23% of total votes, while opposition Mongolian People's Party's candidate Badmayaniambu Ujian received 41.97%, and Tsakhiagiin Elbegdorj, candidate of Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party, got 6.5% of total votes. Reaction to election result. U.S. President Barack Obama issued a statement on presidential election in Mongolia on 27 June 2013, the same day the election result was announced. President Obama stated, "President Elbegdorj has been an important leader in advancing democracy and freedom in his country and a key partner for the United States in Asia and globally." Through its impressive democratic achievements and its progress on economic liberalization, Mongolia serves as a significant example of positive reform and transformation for peoples around the world. Vuk Jeremik, President of the United Nations General Assembly for the 67th session, expressed satisfaction with the fair and successful election in his congratulations to Elbegdorj on 27 June 2013. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon congratulated for successful presidential election in Mongolia in his congratulatory message to Elbegdorj. European Commission President José Manuel Barroso said, "The European Commission considers that the presidential election has become another vital step of the Mongolian people to establish a democratic society that respects the rule of law and human rights." In his congratulatory note to Elbegdorj on 28 June 2013, German Chancellor Angela Merkel pointed out the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe sent its group to Mongolia for the first time to observe the presidential election, and it was an expression of strengthening democracy and transparency in Mongolia. In her congratulations to Elbegdorj,